Thank you for inviting me. When the German President Christian Wulff, our newly elected president, has visited Ankara, he said Christianity belongs to Turkey. We had big discussions on that inside Germany. Does Christianity really belong to Turkey? Because he mentioned some days before, inside Germany, the Islam belongs to Germany. And there were big discussions, of course, too. But I think he was right. We should remember that during the Ottoman Empire, millions of Christians and, of course, other religious minorities lived there. And we should remember that the Jesus followers called themselves as Christians for the first time in the city of Antakya, which is a Turkish territory, although the Turks came later. But unfortunately, the Turkish government and many citizens still neglect this part of history, although it's also part of their identity. The discrimination of religious minority from Christian and Jewish descent and even Muslim minorities has a long history, culminating in the displacement and killing of hundreds of thousands of Armenians. Up until today, and despite the fact that Turkey has been negotiating with the EU for accession since, meanwhile, 5 years, religious minorities face significant hurdles in exercising their religion. These impediments have also been listed in the recent progress report that was presented by the Commission last week. Let me mention some points. Protestant and Alevi students are forced to join religious instruction. The closing of the Halki seminary prevents the Greek Orthodox community from training its clergy. Many congregations struggle with unlawful expropriations. In example, think of Mor Gabriel, the monastery. The religious affiliation is still stated in the ID card, and that is a problem, of course, too, because this bears potential for discrimination. Even where steps in positive direction have been taken, the implementation falls short of expectations, and that is a problem that we have since all of these years we are working together with Turkey. There's quite a lot of very good ideas, good things. Legislation is written on paper, but not yet implemented, not part of real life. And the reform, and this is the same with the reform of the law, it fails to address the issue of restitution for properties sold to third parties, in example, properties of religious minorities. Overall, Turkey fails to address the issue to give religious minorities a legal status. It's not part of real life up to today. In its study on global restrictions on religion, the Pew Forum ranks Turkey as having high government restrictions and as having a high social hostilities index. And the latter issue becomes evident in cases of harassment of and violence against religious minorities. And the peak was the killing of Randink and the killing of the 3 Protestant Christians in Malatya in April 2007. The result, more and more citizens leave the country, resulting in diminishing numbers of religious minorities from Christian and Jewish descent. Today, they are living just 1% of these minorities. And for us, as European Parliament, and I think all the political groups are unique in this. This situation is, of course, not acceptable. We should never forget. We should not forget that Turkey wants to become a member of the EU, and that means it wants to become a member of this union of values. The European Union is a union of values, and we can accept. We only can accept new member states who share our values, and religious freedom is one of the fundamental values, and it is absolutely not negotiable for us. But Turkish government seems to invest so little efforts into improving the situation. Although the progress report positively highlights that the state authorities held regular meetings with representatives from religious minorities, that Prime Minister Erdogan has issued a circular letter to local authorities to put existing laws into practice and protect non-Muslim cemeteries, in example, that workshops have been held with Alevi representatives, that for the first time since 1915 a church service has been conducted in the Armenian Orthodox Holy Cross Church in Van, and so on. But these statements remain mere lip services and deception as long as, in example, the Ecumenical Patriarch is not allowed to call himself Ecumenical Patriarch. So he's not allowed to be what he really is. Huh? And that is unbelievable, unbelievable. Protestant and Alevi communities are denied the right to hold services or to build places of worship. And no government program exists to address the prejudice towards religious minorities among Turkish citizens. In this regard, the Commission progress report is still too weak, much too weak, and I hope that my colleague and rapporteur in the Foreign Affairs Committee, Ria Oomen, will make it very clear that freedom of religion, no, it is not negotiable. She will do it. We do it since years, because the situation has not changed. It has not changed inside in Turkey. The Christian and Jewish heritage in Turkey is also a European heritage. It's part of our history too, and this needs to be stated out. We cannot accept that this heritage will disappear through the exodus of minority groups and the destruction of archaeological evidence. If Turkey allows this to happen, it will at the same time destroy the supporting pillars of the bridge which it has to cross on its way, let's say, closer to the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Konrad Szymanski. I'm a member of the Conservative group in the Parliament. We work closely with the Christian Democrats in many committees, including the Foreign Affairs Committee, which is the main committee responsible for the elaboration of the parliamentary stance on the things like the enlargement, including the Turkish enlargement. I think it's worth saying that every time I see the Greek-American institution here in Brussels, I'm very happy because I think it widened our scope of perception. It widened our perception of the world affairs. Sometimes that kind of things like the enlargement are our own shared responsibility. That's why I think it was good to take such a long journey to Brussels and spend a couple of days here and share your views and share your sensitivity with the many leading personalities here in Brussels, including parliamentarians. So I would like to encourage you to follow that line and to put more attention to European institutions, because I think sometimes we experience very weak exchange of views, exchange of experience, exchange of intellectual life, which leads us to misunderstandings, which leads us sometimes for quite disastrous accidents at the practical level. So it's good to use free time between the crucial turning point in our own common history to talk about such a things like enlargement a little bit more substantially. And this conference is, of course, a good occasion to do it. I would like also to say a couple of words about the European Parliament's role in the process. Of course, European Parliament has only limited and selective role in the legislation process in the European Union. This is something different us from national parliaments. We, of course, only shape the guidelines, the political guidelines of the European Union, but when we talk about the enlargement, the role of the European Parliament is crucial, because this is the treaty issue, and there is no such a treaty with the external third party which would be signed by the European Union without the consent of the European Parliament. So this is generally perceived as a foreign affairs area, but this area is covered by the treaty regime. It means that the role of the European Parliament is rising, and the role of the European Parliament is unavoidable, I would say, in that matter. Of course, when we talk about the human rights and especially religious freedom, we face a lot of sophistications. We face a lot of delicate aspects of that thing. I would like to mention it because Dr. Renate Sommer already described to you the picture we have before us, and I would say this is almost anonymous picture, because when we see the regular reports presented by the rapporteur to the Parliament, by the Foreign Affairs Committee to the plenary, we see that there is no important political power which would like to postpone, to delete, or to soften the language of the Parliament about the real situation on the ground in Turkey, including the situation of the religious freedom and religious minorities in Turkey. And I would also say, as a person who shadowed this report, this yearly reports since 6 years, since the beginning of my presence here in Brussels, that these reports are more and more strict, I would say, more and more concrete, and more express a kind of anger from the European side, that we spend a lot of time, and sometimes we hear the argument that we already spent so many times, so many years talking about enlargement without any specific result. Yes, it's true, but we also have a right to be a little bit angry, because we are talking about the religious freedom, among other things, for a very long period of time without any specific, any crucial result. But anyway, the human rights, of course, this is not a simple thing. First of all, I would propose to remember that in the human rights international framework, we have to recognize the fact that we have two kinds of human rights agenda, the soft one and the hard one, I would say. One is unconditional, recognized universally by the international community, and the second part is a kind of political guidelines or agreements between the member states. And we shouldn't mix the two different things of human rights together, because if we overload the human rights agenda and the human rights framework, institutional framework, we will lose the efficiency for sure. But, of course, the religious freedom belongs to this third part, belongs to this crucial, is one of the pillars of the human rights framework at the international level, and, of course, also at the European level. Religious freedom is recognized by the UN conventions, but also it's recognized by the European Convention of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms, and this is why we can easily say that it's unnegotiable, because this is clearly defined, clearly stressed by the conventions, which are not just guidelines, which are not just the agreements between states. It's just unconditional. It comes, in our mind, it comes from the dignity of human being. It comes from the very fact of being a human. So this is the first differentiation. Sorry, the kind of sophistication. The second problem, of course, we face, especially in the religious freedom, is the difference between the legal persecution or legal discrimination or political discrimination, which is fully attached to the activity of the governments, and, of course, social hostility. We shouldn't blame everybody, every government, only because of the fact that some parts of the extreme extremist environment in the society behave quite hostile. In case of Turkey, as in case of many other countries, we see that although there are two different things, although we have a kind of interconnection, a kind of interdependence. Already mentioned report by the Pew Forum for Public Life and Religion, which was presented in the European Parliament, I think 5 or 6 weeks ago, show very clearly that on this graph, Turkey belongs to the countries with quite high legal discrimination against the minorities and quite high social hostility toward religious minority. That's why I would propose to remember about the division, but I would like also to mention that these two different spheres are not completely independent. In our work in the Parliament, one of the most important challenge is, of course, to avoid the instrumentalization of the human rights issues. Not to use the human rights issues just for political reasons, just for any other reasons than the protection of the dignity of human being. That's the very challenging thing, of course. But it doesn't mean that we should leave the religious freedom as a too much sophisticated thing, as a too complicated arena, and forget about it. This trend, I would say, it was the reality of the European Union in the past. For many years, I mentioned a lot of times that the European Union should put more attention to the religious freedom, and I think this is the case. When we see the reports, not only on Turkey, and the reports concerning the religious freedom issues, we see that this agenda has a rising importance in the political agenda of the European Union. European Union more and more easily rise the question of the religious freedom in the world. I would like to see it even more brave. I would like to see more involvement of the European Union in that kind of that dimension of the human rights. But I think the process is very positive. The process is very visible, and already mentioned declaration of German President Christian Wolff in Ankara is something very, very promising. It means that religious freedom come back to the mainstream of the European external relation, come back to the mainstream interest, mainstream attention of the European leaders. That's very, very important because, as I said, it was neglected by a couple of years, maybe more than just a couple of years. Is it a breach? That's the very complicated question. I spent many days thinking about how to perceive the title of the conference. Is it a breach? I would say it is, of course. It could be the breach for Turkey to start protecting people with other beliefs, because this is not only a legal or not only political question. I think it's a social question. If we see the relation toward the Turkish accession in the European Union in the member countries, we see very clearly that this is not the government's responsibility to slow down the process. The government only reflects something more important. The governments of the European Union, many governments, slow down the process or put down the attention to the process only because of one crucial social phenomenon. The social phenomenon is the fact that the European societies are more and more aware that the real situation in Turkey, the situation on the ground, including the situation of the religious freedom, is something which is not improving. It's something which takes too much time, too long, without any specific result. Of course, there is a paradox that the most distant, the most skeptical societies toward Turkey are those who are most secular one at the same time. But anyway, I would say that the religious freedom, the protection of the religious freedom could be the bridge, because it would be a real proof that Turks want to be really closer to the European societies. It would bring up, it would take up, it would lift up the mutual trust, which now is disappearing, I would say. And this is why I would advise not to concentrate only on the political or legal level of this process, because this process now is deteriorating because of the social changes at the European in the European societies, and no government can change society's mind, society's preferences, society's choice against the facts, contrary to the real situation on the ground. So trying to find the correct answer for the question about the bridge, I would say that this could be the bridge. It is a kind of moving bridge which can connect Europe with Turkey and Turkey with Europe, but it also can disconnect these two part of the social, not only political, not only legal, but also the social dialogue. So this is not the only reason I would say that religious freedom has objective importance, and it doesn't matter what kind of political context is around. But I think religious freedom is one of that things. It's not the only, of course, not the only one, but this is one of the things which can be the factor which bring more trust between us and which can start this process again. Because now we can say it very clearly that the process is at least slowed down. Thank you.
I wondered if I could ask you to just broaden your focus a bit. We're talking about minorities in Turkey and the at-risk status of so many minorities in Turkey. And in many ways that mirrors a broader phenomenon in the greater Middle East. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom has been doing a lot of work on Iraq, for example, throughout the region, but certainly on Iraq. Given the recent attacks on Christians in Iraq 2 weeks ago, given what's continuing to happen with Copts in Egypt, given the status of religious minorities and Christians in particular in the Holy Lands, that in many ways is a part of a broader phenomenon which this conference's topic fits. And I wonder if you could say a little bit about, from the perspective of the European Parliament and your committees, the way that the Turkey situation might be seen in relation to this broader regional phenomenon.
So it's this question or statement is not so easy to answer, of course. I think there's a difference between, still a difference between Turkey and the neighboring country of Turkey in the east. I think Turkey is, of course, more European than the other countries you mentioned. But we as European Parliament, we notice very well what's going on around in the Mediterranean area. And we try, especially my political group, the Christian Democrats, European People's Party, we try to force a dialogue between Christian Democrats and those countries with a view on tolerance. And this is what we need to have, of course, in those countries, more tolerance against minorities, not ethnic minorities, of course, but especially religious minorities. Otherwise, this exodus of religious minorities in those countries will go on. And we will have a separated world in the end. And that is not what we want to have, because that makes the political situation more difficult, too. Where we don't have religious tolerance on religious minorities or different religions. We have probably no tolerance to different political systems, and that could cause severe problems. And of course, we try to avoid that. Inside Turkey, I think yes, we have to take care that we have to observe the situation very well. We do it already, of course, but we urgently need to go on with this. And we always, one of our tasks is to make it public what's going on inside Turkey, because as far as I know, inside Turkey, the Turkish media's, Turkish newspapers, they are facing restrictions too, massive restrictions. Press freedom is going down to the ground. Quite a lot of journalists are sitting in jails, and they are more and more afraid to write openly about the real situation in Turkey. And it is the task of us as European parliamentarians to make this public and to talk about this with the Turkish authorities and the Turkish government. But to me, it seems that the situation inside Turkey becomes more and more worse, because since years I have the impression that Erdogan himself he misuses the European process. He uses for himself the argument of religious freedom, but religious freedom means to him that religious freedom just for Muslims or Sunni Muslims, that say the majority inside Turkey. And religious freedom has, for him, obviously nothing to do with religious minorities. Religious freedom is to wear the headscarf. Religious freedom is to go back to, let's say, to have more and more Islamization of the country. And there have been several efforts in the last years. Again and again, of course, the headscarf issue, then efforts, he tried to ban alcohol, he tried to install single-sex parks or separated beaches for men and women, and some years ago, even in a TV comic for children, Winnie the Pooh, I don't know whether you know it. It's very popular, of course, and it was banned because there is a piglet in this TV comic too, and from the state TV. So this sounds funny, but it's remarkable that happens inside Turkey, and it's not a ridiculous example. It shows where he wants to go. And on the other hand, he always claims religious freedom in the European member states for Turkish immigrants. And I think we, of course, we have religious freedoms in the European member states. And you cannot say it's not allowed to build very big mosques in each and every city, so the European member states are against religious freedom. That's simply not true. That is a question, of course, of integration. But he himself, the Turkish Prime Minister, accuses Europe not to give his Turkish citizens who immigrated in the EU enough religious freedom, but he himself is trying to go on in Islamization of the country, and I think that is a dangerous situation. And of course, we make this public. This is the one and only possibility to change the situation inside Turkey, I think.
If I can add a couple of words from the perspective of the foreign affairs, I think the religious freedom is a victim of strategic changes in the Turkish foreign affairs guidelines, new guidelines. I think this strategic deep proposed by Minister Davutoglu in real terms means more and more interconnections, interactions, more and more closer relations, not only political but also cultural, naturally, with the neighbor countries. And one of the consequences of that great change we see at the moment, this great change toward Iraq, Iran, is of course the, I would say, diffusion of ideas, the situation when we see that this past big difference between Turkey and neighbors is becoming more and more a question of the past. At the moment, Turkish state and AK Party is mainly responsible for that process. With this great change in the strategic choices, decide to open the doors for all the ideas of the neighboring countries. And this is why we see since at least 2005 the growing number, not only legal obstacles, but mainly the social hatred, the social hostility. I think this is clearly visible that there is interconnection between the strategic choices and the changes in the Turkish society, which is not very helpful.
First of all, we thank the European Parliament as Americans and Archons from the United States and Europe in publicizing the status of religious freedom and human rights in Turkey. It's very important to all of us that our church is able to exercise its ministry freely. And I wanted to ask your comment on the fact that last year during the apostolic visit of His All Holiness the Ecumenical Patriarch in the United States at the Brookings Institution, he announced that when and if the Bayukada Pringipos orphanage that was illegally confiscated, when and if Turkey would implement the decision, the unanimous decision of the European Court of Human Rights to return it, I wanted to obtain your understanding and your commentary on the fact that just recently we understand that on June 15th, another decision from the court to have Turkey return the property back to the Ecumenical Patriarchate is now happening. And how do you perceive this, Dr. Sommer, Mr. Szymanski?
Of course, the problem with the European Court of Human Rights is a lack of execution. This is the international court. There's something different than the court in our countries. And Turkey is not the only country which wouldn't like to follow the guidelines from the court's decision. Some countries of the Council of Europe decided to pay the price for that and not to follow, especially in that kind of not very individual, I would say, cases like the cases you mentioned. Their diplomacy decide to just to pay the fines and nothing else. The problem is how the Council of Europe as a political body could react for that situation. Of course, we see the problem of evolving a court's doctrine in Strasbourg, and I'm afraid we will see a lot of divisions concerning many different decisions of the courts. But at the moment, the only solution is to raise the question at the level of the Council of Europe, because this court is, I would say, politically guarded by that institution. This is probably the most efficient, probably the most important institution of the Council of Europe.
I have a question, actually, and I put this in context because I'm a lawyer and I negotiate all the time with people, and I often, usually I'm the one that, my clients are the ones that have to pay the money to someone else. and it's usually the attorney on the other side says, that is non-negotiable, I want X dollars, but it's always negotiable. And so my question is, you both use the term non-negotiable. What do you mean by that? Is it truly non-negotiable? In other words, if Turkey does not grant religious minorities, and if maybe even the majority, certain rights with respect to religious freedom, does that mean they will not gain entrance into the European Union, at least as far as you're concerned?
Yes. Let's say religious freedom for us is a kind of litmus test. Yeah? So it prescribes the situation of the whole society of a country. And this is one of the basic values, religious freedom. So if Turkey is not willing to give religious freedom to all religions, it is not European, and it will never become a member of the EU. Never. Turkey knows this very well, but Turkey knows as well that it has so many problems in other fields because it does not fulfill any of the political Copenhagen criteria up to today. So it's kind of poker, I think. Turkey knows that what the German Chancellor Merkel prescribes as a privileged partnership, that means a special neighborhood relation, is the one and only possibility to come closer to the EU and to benefit from the EU. And it's a poker of the Turkish government to get as much as possible in this special relationship that will be installed someday instead of a membership of Turkey. So that would mean for Turkey to receive quite a lot of European funding and kind of freedom, more freedom of movement for workers and so on in relations with the EU. But this would even this special neighborhood relation for us would only be possible if Turkey at the whole would be more tolerant against minorities, because in this situation we can give as well pressure to politicians and to the government in Turkey as we can do it now, that Turkey still insists to become a member of the EU. And if someone says, "Oh, if they don't become a member, we are no longer powerful as Europeans to help to change the situation inside Turkey," no, I think that's wrong. We are powerful too if we install a privileged partnership, special neighborhood relations, because we can say if you don't do what we want you to do in basic things to follow our basic values, then even this privileged partnership will not be possible. And if you talk about money, money is the best pressure you can give to a government or country.
I already said that the international law has a very limited execution, but the negotiation concerning the enlargement is something different. And a negotiable stance on the enlargement means that it's hard to imagine that the European Parliament, including me and probably Dr. Renate Sommer, would raise hands in favor of enlargement with the status quo on the area of the religious freedom. This is not the only thing, of course, but this is one of the crucial things which shouldn't be put on the table as a negotiation bargaining. But of course, I have to say that my country, Poland, is traditionally pro-enlargement country, and Poland is also one of the most pro-Turkish country because we have a very good, historically very good relation with the Turkish Empire. There's a 600 years old tradition of diplomatic relations, but it doesn't mean that we would like to accelerate the process without any condition. And I, as a Polish parliamentarian, wouldn't raise hands in favor of status quo in the area of the religious freedom as well. Thank you.
I'll let Mr. Stratakis ask a question.
Yesterday we heard from the chief Turkish negotiator, who indicated and admitted that Turkey is not perfect, but it is improving. And he mentioned that in the context of religious freedom. From your point of view, do you share that view?
Of course we can share that view. We have a progress, for example, in the law on foundation, but we have a problem with the implementation of the law. So if we want to evaluate the process, we have to take into account that there are intentions, there are projects, drafts, and there are votes in the Turkish Parliamentary Assembly which are helpful. But it doesn't mean that we can evaluate in terms of persons the level of common acquis, I would say, in such an area like the religious freedom. Our expectations are very clear. They were mentioned hundreds of times in the documents of the European Union Commission, Parliament, Parliamentary Committee. So, of course, we have to express our goodwill. We shouldn't be closed. We shouldn't use the religious freedom for other purposes. I will stress it. But it doesn't mean that the Parliament or the Commission is ready to take anything from this part of the negotiation process and say, okay, before the final decisions described in our negotiation position papers will be fulfilled.
Thank you very much. It was an honor to have you here.